Rick, could you post the slides, please? Again, good afternoon, everyone. We want to welcome you to our Friday afternoon, 2 to 3 in my time zone, Learning for Leaders. And we have an excellent conversation scheduled for you this afternoon. And as part of this conversation, we have some excellent resources. Crisis response, opportunities, and state regional strategies, farmer mental health. Next slide, please. So for an overview this afternoon, we have ECAP Program Committee Extension Inventory. We have 2 institutional examples, NIFA support, regional experiences, leading on challenges, issues. So we're very, as I stated, we're very excited about our conversation this afternoon. Following our conversation, follow our examples, then we will move to questions and answers. Okay. So first, from an introduction standpoint, I would like to introduce Dr. Carolyn Williams, ECAP Program Committee Chair. Carolyn is the Executive Associate Director for Extension from Prairie View A&M University. We have Jeff Dwyer from Michigan State Extension Director, and is Cheryl Eshabach, who is Health and Nutrition Institute Director. We have Laura Perry Johnson, Associate Dean and Director for Corporate Extension, University of Georgia. We have Brett Elrod, Acting Division Director, USDA NIFA. And John Lawrence from ECOP, he's the Vice President of Extension and Outreach, Iowa State University, and David Brown, Behavioral Health State Specialist. As I stated, we have some excellent resources this afternoon, and we will begin with Carolyn Williams.
Good afternoon, everyone. Glad y'all could join us. The ECOP Program Committee follows a process that identifies issues raised in one or more of our regions that could benefit from our community resource sharing across the system. We did this first with the Coming Together for Racial Understanding led by Rachel Wellborn, and then we did a similar process with opioid use in this area led by Dr. Mark Skidmore. And then the committee identified farmer behavioral health or farmer stress as an issue, and we collected related educational resources. At about that same time, NIFA provided regional grants to fund farm and ranch stress assistance networks in each geographic region. So the link that you see here is what we have been able to retrieve educational resources from all of the 5 regions with information that is available. Now, the ECOP committee is not planning additional work in this area, but is sharing these resources that are made available on our e-extension platform. The ECOP committee is very appreciative to those who shared their work and made these resources available to the system. Okay, and hopefully you will read that and go to it and see what's available. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. And then we'll move on to our presentation from Michigan State University. Cheryl Esbach is making that presentation, and that will start just about now.
Thank you for the opportunity to share Michigan State's programs and strategies addressing farm stress. In 2016, the Michigan Department of Ag and Rural Development approached MSU Extension about the alarming increase in the number of farmers dying by suicide, in particular the dairy industry, and they asked us to help. MSU Extension developed a half-day workshop called Communicating with Farmers Under Stress for individuals who work with farmers. based on the popularity of that program, a second workshop was developed called Weathering the Storm, Cultivating a Productive Mindset. This was for farmers and their families and neighbors. These programs were designed to be co-taught by ag and health educators, and the trainings focused on the unique stressors of farmers and provide an overview of ag market trends and identifying and managing stress in ourselves and others, and communicating with farmers who may be struggling with high levels of stress. In January 2019, Michigan State hosted a national summit on farm stress management. Attendees took the mental health first aid training, had a day of professional development, and were trained as facilitators in both of MSU Extension's programs. In the summer 2019, a Train the Trainer course was launched by MSU for land-grant universities and cooperative extension staff to become trained facilitators. That training course is open to other states who are interested, so you can contact me for more information if you'd like to enroll in that course. There are currently 20 states implementing MSU Extension's farm stress programs. 9 are in the North Central region. The University of Illinois was added this week, and you can see the other states were listed on the previous slide. So the programs have scripted PowerPoints, articles, activities, discussion guides, and fact sheets and videos, as well as a standardized program evaluation. You can visit our farm stress website that's listed at the top left of this slide, and you can see that our website is structured into 2 sections. One includes support for resilient farms. We have financial decision and management guides. We also have recordings of our weekly virtual breakfast Zoom meetings with farmers. And there's also a section on resilient minds. This is where we have recorded webinars on farm stress topics, fact sheets, and action planning guides that can be downloaded at no cost, and we have podcasts. So like the other states, we have found that great success in integrating farm stress programs into existing programs that bring ag audiences together. We have a 20-minute presentation that we use with Farm Bill and commodity update meetings. MSU also launched a new teletherapy pilot program. Our farm stress program lead at MSU is Eric Karbowski, and he is working with a large behavioral health organization to assist referrals to licensed mental health professionals across Michigan. So with healthcare pivoting to telemedicine during this time, there's really never been a better time for us to do a referral to teletherapy for farmers who reach out to us. So if you're interested, there is a link to that later in the slides to our new teletherapy pilot program. My last highlight for MSU Extension's farm stress efforts, the last slide, will show our national partnerships. So in 2019, we trained Farm Service Agency employees online and in person, and at a national training for FSA in Detroit. FSA adapted the MSU Extension Farm Stress programs to their audience and put the training in their own AgLearn system. Based on that success, we are currently wrapping up contracts with the American Farm Bureau Federation, National Farmers Union, and Farm Credit. Each organization has its own D2L online course for their employees or members. In-person trainings were also conducted at the 2020 annual conventions for Farm Bureau and NFU. And this is my last point. A very hot off the press outcome of these national partnerships is the current launching of Rural Resilience Farm Stress Training. And you can see the course icon there on the right. This online course has 3 units combining the best of all D2L training courses to date, and it is free and open to the public. So if you're interested in enrolling in this, you can join a wait list till the course officially launches in a few weeks, and we have a link to that course in this slide deck. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. We'll go to our next state example, comes from Georgia. Laura Perry Johnson, Associate Dean for Extension, will make that presentation. Good afternoon, Laura.
Thanks, Rick. You can change the slides. Okay, I started back in 2017. That year we had a late freeze that killed most of our blueberries. The year before we were the top state in blueberries. Then we had bad weather and tornadoes that really took out a lot of our pecan industry. That is another thing that we lead the industry in. Then we had Hurricane Irma that came right during cotton season and really put a hurting on our top row crop in the state, which is cotton. And on top of all this, we were dealing with low commodity prices. And we are used to dealing with white flies in our vegetable industry, but that year they got so bad that it was affecting cotton and some of our other row crops. So it seemed like the perfect storm. But as we look back, this actually might have been the easiest of the last 4 years we've had. Next slide. So coming in October of 2018, we had Hurricane Michael, and I know you've heard of Hurricane Michael and the devastation. It went a swath across our state. It was about 2/3 of the state, but really has impacted the entire state, and we're still dealing with that. In fact, yesterday was the deadline for farmers to apply for hurricane relief funds, and so they still are waiting on some disaster relief from that. So we had planned a Rural Stress Summit to be held in Atlanta in December of 2018, and Michael came right before that. We were looking at what was going on nationally. Since 1999, farmer suicides had increased greatly. We were having a lot of issues with rural health, finances, opioid issues, and all of those things were combining to really put stress at the local level. At this conference, we had 135 participants from 20 states and the District of Columbia, and Ann Hazlett was the keynote speaker from USDA. We partnered with the College of Family and Consumer Science and Social Work to put on this conference, and then we were thinking, where would we go from there? So next slide. So after 2018 and Michael, and we were still working to recover from that, things just continued to get worse. The lingering effects of Hurricane Michael are still with us today. They have not been easy to overcome. Commodity prices that were low got even lower. All of this extreme weather really affected and ramped up. We like to say we have one of the best growing environments for fruits and vegetables, but we also have one of the best for pest and disease. So at that time, across the nation, people were looking at rural issues, and there were a lot of focus on this nationally. And in Georgia, our legislature set up a task force to look at this. So we started thinking in extension, what can we do to help? How are we uniquely positioned? I knew that I wasn't going to be able to turn our extension agents and specialists into therapists or counselors, but surely I thought there was a way for us to help connect the two. During the Rural Stress Summit, we had really formed a strong partnership with Anna Chiat, who's the Dean of Social Work at the University of Georgia. And she had really worked with us to help us understand that our health and wellness programs really ought to include a mental health component as well. So what we wanted to do is ask the ag agents and specialists to be connectors and help put those people that could bring some expertise with mental health and wellness with those farmers and growers that might need them. So I asked the Southwest District Extension Director, that's our largest ag area in the state, if she would head up a pilot program, and we planned during late 2019, and we piloted a program starting January of 2020. We pulled out some of our top ag specialists and agents because I knew, kind of like a cow herd, you need those lead cows that if they do it, everyone else will follow behind. And they helped us plan what they thought would be doable. In Georgia, we have production meetings during the winter months, and we meet with thousands of producers during the months of January, February, and March. So next slide, please. So I made this slide for them. If you'll move to the next one, please, Rick. I made this slide for them, and I asked every one of our specialists to put it in their presentation. We also put this in all of our production guides. And at the production meetings, we had several pilot studies where we brought in health professionals to do some routine screening like blood pressure and things like that. And then we gave our partners at Behavioral Health and Developmental Disability the opportunity to do a commercial at the beginning of our production meetings. The first one we did was in early January, and the next day, 2 farmers called to get a counseling appointment. So this has been very well received both by our ag agents and specialists and our clientele, and we will continue to work on this project, particularly after we get through this corona crisis.
Thank you very much, Laura. We'll move on to some discussion of NIFA's involvement in this important area, and that will be presented by Brent Elrod, Acting Division Director for 3 different divisions at this point. It's the longest signature line I've ever seen. Brent, welcome this afternoon, and we look forward to your comments.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks, everyone. Joining you from Kansas City today, where it's quite lovely outside, despite the other thing that nature is throwing at us. And it's just a reminder that the work that Extension's doing related to stress assistance for producers and for families across the country is so critically important. And we've just been very impressed as the system has ramped up in response to COVID-19 to get the best and latest and best information out to producers and their families. And we really want to salute you for that effort. Parallel to that, the work that's been going on some time for NIFA and the Regional Rural Development Centers and others, as we've looked at behavioral health issues, E-Extension has been out on the forefront of this as well. So it's another example, again, how we have positioned ourselves well to be able to be responsive in times of need. And certainly this is the case with the challenges that producers are continuing to face. The Farmers Ranch Stress Assistance Network is a farm bill discretionary program. It came back in the most recent farm bill and actually received an authorization for $2 million in fiscal year 19. So as many of you know, we went out for bid and for 4 regions, and we've had at least, we got the Iowa State and North Central contingent that'll be talking about their specific project in just a bit. We are back out to bid. Congress allocated up the full amount of $10 million for fiscal year 20. And so we just launched the bidding process this past week. You'll see the links to the announcements. You'll be able to have access to those, and hopefully you got them through the various listservs. We're going to have an applicant webinar next week to talk about specifics for that. So what we're doing is trying to stand up these regions so that a lead entity can serve all 12 or 13 states in that particular region. So in this year, we're going to use the $10 million and we're going to split it across four regions. So after NIFA takes its piece, less than $2.5 million for each of the regions, then to begin to build out a network across the entire 12 or 13 states. So now is the time to put your best thinking caps on, put those proposals together and submit. The lead entities can be state cooperative extensions, state departments of ag, tribal organizations, and non-governmental organizations. We're also asking that you put together 3-year budgets, because if Congress continues to allocate the full 10 million, then it'll be up to 7-point-some million over the course of a 3-year period for these projects to really build out the network. The primary conduit for services are going to be dissemination of information through helplines, websites. There's going to be training and outreach. There's going to be access to support groups, and there's going to be rural referral to clinical services. We're also asking for a comprehensive network where folks really engage with their USDA partners and extension offices at the local level, so that we can ensure that wherever that producer is or that family member that comes in and expresses some concern, that they potentially can be connected to someone in the network that'll be able to get them to the support and services that they may need. So as I mentioned, this is just one component of the work that we're doing around behavioral health. Obviously, it's a critical piece. I want to salute the work that Georgia, Michigan State, all the other partners have offered up across the entire region. I also dropped a couple links into the chat box that I wanted to spotlight. We've also provided some support to the Northeast Regional Extension Management Center, and they've put together information around farm and family risk. And so I dropped a link in the chat for that. And I also wanted to remind that we have the AFRI announcement back open for fiscal year 20 for COVID-19 responses. And there are extension only options. And so we're looking for various angles to approach this potential disruption in supply chain, how we come back together from these stay-at-home orders. And so this is a great opportunity for extension only or integrated projects to get submitted. We are going to be looking for those that have quick turnarounds and can be responsive immediately. So that link is also included in the chat box. And I hope if you have questions, you can follow up directly with the program contacts on those. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Brent, for a good overview of the programs and work at NIFA, as well as all of USDA. We're moving on to one of the regional programs as an example, and David Brown from Iowa State University will be making that presentation.
All right, thank you all for inviting me. Again, my name is David Brown. I'm the Behavioral Health State Specialist for Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. You know, and as we all know, the farmer ranchers have really had a few tough years, and the economic stress, weather-related issues, and now all the implications of COVID-19. And in Iowa, we're now starting to deal with the closure of meat processing plants. And these have all placed unprecedented pressures on the Iowa agriculture community. So given that, I want to provide just a brief update on the regional project that was funded through NIFA through the Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network. And we titled that the Farm and Ranch Wellness, the Next Steps. Now, this project, which Iowa State University took the lead on, also includes representatives from 7 other North Central region land grant institutions. They include the University of Illinois, Kansas State University, University of Minnesota, University of Missouri, University of Nebraska, North Dakota State, and the Iowa State University. Now, what's going on right now is the principal investigator from each of these states, we're meeting monthly to kind of review progress and provide state updates. Interested parties from other North Central region states have also been invited to attend, and many of them have. And we have also other subcommittee PI groups that are meeting regularly to focus on key areas of the grant. And the efforts of the PEI team have focused on 3 key areas that we included in the grant. That includes web-based program catalog development, state plans of actions, the expansion of the Iowa Concern Hotline. Now, this network is partnering to develop some web-based program catalogs of stress assistance programs. These will eventually be linked throughout the region of the state. The web-based catalogs will be shared with key contacts, other entities, including commodity groups, legislators, NIOSH centers, agriculture business group, commodity groups, and all those other groups that support farmers and ranchers. News releases and other social media announcements related to the posting of these catalogs will also be provided. Now, in addition, all of the state PIs are also charged with supervising the continuation of existing stress assistance programming, developing new programming to meet different needs. Therefore, each state has a unique and specific objectives, completing all of those to complete all the overarching goals. And yes, the COVID-19 pandemic has added some additional complexity and direction to some of these plans. The other program I do want to mention, which is a very important piece of our project, is the Iowa Concern Hotline. Other state extension services in the North Central region now have the capability to market the Iowa Concern Hotline to their state constituencies, access to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, stress counseling services. We have also been working with Kansas, Ohio, and Missouri, who have already or are preparing to send listings of their statewide mental health and other resources so that Iowa Concern can also provide resource and referral capability to those states as well. And beginning May 1, Iowa Concern will also beginning to track zip codes, so we have a better idea to assess all the regional impact. What to do now, but it's impossible to kind of share all the activities and partnerships and resources that are benefiting the agriculture community in these 8 states. What I'm going to do now is just share just a few highlights of what's going on through this grant. ISU right now is offering Question, Persuade, Refer virtually, and that's a 1-hour short-term suicide prevention evidence-informed suicide prevention program. Now, we originally were going to offer that face-to-face to agriculture producers across Iowa, but due to the COVID-19 epidemic, QPR allowed its instructors a short window of frame to provide that virtually. And so we moved very quickly to have our certified extension specialists who are trained in the program to provide that virtually. And so beginning about mid-April, we started initially with about 7 programs. That has now blossomed up to 17 programs. And at this time, we have around 300 participants who have registered for all of these programs. And this program was heavily marketed to Iowa Department of Agriculture, Land Stewardship, commodity groups, Farm Service Agency, and other local agriculture lenders. It was also marketed to our regional partners within this grant. So we do have some other state participation as well. I do want to touch on, at least to give some of all the states a little bit of credit for all the things that they're doing. Kansas State University has disseminated Generation RX materials that target prescription drug misuse. And they've distributed that to pesticide trainings, mental health first aid classes. They're also working on a state-specific website, or actually they have a state-specific website that serves as a catalog for state resources, which will function in conjunction with other websites as well. University of Missouri has provided 27 mental health first aid workshops to 420 participants, include adult and youth mental health first aid classes. The University of Illinois is taking the lead on a multi-state regional evaluation of mental health first aid classes that are being offered in many of the participating states, including Iowa, Minnesota, Ohio, Minnesota, and Illinois. And this evaluation will kind of evaluate changes in the rural participants' self-efficacy of performing mental health first aid, including intentions to perform mental health first aid, and those stigmatizing attitudes towards individuals with mental health conditions. The University of Minnesota Extension Rural Task Force has completed many of its first-year goals. Some of their key internal efforts included mental health first aid training and the creation of the Rural Stress Resources page on their website. So they've got a lot of it going on. They also had an awareness day at the Minnesota State Fair, which engaged nearly 600 fairgoers. Farming in Tough Times seminars are being held across the state and to general mental health outreach. The University of Nebraska moved forward with proposed financial management courses. Prior to the closing in-person training in March, 4 classes were completed and 2 classes were in progress, and these were completed then virtually. They had 50 participants that had completed these courses. North Dakota State University Extension expanded development and distribution of all their educational resources focused on understanding and managing rural stressors. Now, a complete service summary of all the information they provide is really outside of the scope of this response, but so far what they've said is they had developed, printed, and distributed over 100,000 pieces of educational literature through farmers and ranchers in North Dakota. University of Missouri has gathered resources, provided feedback on regional needs, developed an online social media presence, clearinghouse via Facebook, Twitter, Instagram to share resources with farmers, ranchers, producers. And then the Idaho State University farm stress materials were included in the annual pesticide applicator training. Recertification centers held in Iowa. 3 A&R educators received certification from the Michigan State University program that Cheryl just mentioned. And OSU has maintained their website to share resources on farm stress and mental health. And I went through that very quickly, but I think that gives you a really nice snapshot of all the activities that are going on in the states related to the Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network. And in close, we are really grateful for the funding from NIFA that addresses this very important issue. All of the state participants, in fact, we had a meeting this morning with representatives from every state extension service in the North Central region to begin the pre-planning process for the next iteration of the Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Grant. So again, we are really hopeful to continue this project and continue some of the work that we're already doing. And if anyone would like further information about this grant, please feel to contact me. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you, David. And he cut you a little slack on time there because you do represent 7 states in this project. So thank you very much for the overview and the initial findings and activities from each of those states. Quite fascinating. To lead us into a conversation of leadership, which is the theme of this presentation, I'll turn it over to Mark Lattimore to introduce John Lawrence.
Okay. John is the Vice President for Extension and Outreach, leading on challenging issues. So at this time, John, would you just share some thoughts with us? So
yes, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to thank all the speakers. This has been very informative. But let me back up and start by thanking Congress and NIFA for recognizing this as a priority and actually putting some resources into it. And that discussion's probably started 2 or 3 years ago. It's just that the timing of it is such that luckily they did start then, because we really need it now. The need is quite real, and I'm sure you all realize that. You know, the farm income peaked in 2013, and our state, and I'm sure many others, started thinking about the cyclical nature of agriculture and expected to have lower commodity prices, lower farm income in the years ahead. We talked about it being like watching a train wreck in slow motion. We kind of knew that things, based on history, things would get tighter. Financial stress would occur, and that often leads to mental stress. The COVID-19 episode, or the hurricanes that hit Georgia, or the fires in California, or the floods along the Missouri River, were all just events that were kind of punctuated the challenges that were already occurring. The financial stress, and the COVID-19, it's bringing on agriculture. Many commodity prices are off 30% or more in a matter of a couple of months. The emotional stress, not only of dealing with falling prices, but as we've seen in the case of livestock and produce, of watching some of that perhaps be destroyed while there's actually people in need, is got to be doubly difficult. I think it's important to recognize that this is a marathon and not a sprint. Now we've had to react quickly, and we have, but it's going to be with us for a long time. So I want to talk to you from a leader's perspective about 4 aspects that I think are important to keep in mind. One is we have to be prepared for events like this. We have to be respected enough to be called on or listened to when we bring it to people's attention. We need to be able to respond, and we need to be supporting our own staff. So let me talk about those a little bit. Being prepared is having good people in place. And we've heard excellent examples of that work at Michigan State and at Georgia and elsewhere. To be able to have good people in place, understand what the issue is, or that can quickly get up to speed on why these are issues. It's also important to be able to have the resources within the system to go across to other states that are already doing this. We don't have time to reinvent wheels. Michigan State, Cheryl did a great job laying out the work that they've had in place for a number of years, and the number of states that they've impacted in a relatively short period of time. This is time to embrace the system, to work across state lines, and go with those who know what they're doing. Also, these good people will have the relationships in place so that across those state lines they can quickly ramp up. It's important to be respected. And oftentimes Extension is a relationship or reputation-based organization. So that means, ongoing, everyday, year in, year out, it's maintaining those relationships with our farmers in this case, or departments of agriculture or agribusiness, so that when they see a problem, they turn to us first, or vice versa. If we're seeing a challenge out there that they haven't picked up on, they'll return your phone call. It's important to have that relationship. It also comes through in what Laura talked about of working with their healthcare professionals, but at ag meetings. Cheryl talked about this as well, of having the health people at the ag meetings. We saw this in Iowa as well. And it's not enough to just say, yes, you can be on my ag program. It's the ag specialists fully embracing their colleagues across the discipline to say, you respect me, farmer. I respect my colleague on this topic. You need to listen to them. And it's that type of respect that opens the doors and opens the ears and minds of the people we're trying to reach. So that's important. We need to be responsive. Now there's a balancing act between knee-jerk reactions and a thoughtful, purposeful response. but we need to be able to respond when needed. I want to give a shout out here to my colleague, Dr. Deb Sellers, who came to me 18 months ago and said, John, we need to hire a behavioral specialist. A year ago today, David Brown joined our staff as a behavioral state specialist. Had Deb not said we need to be prepared, we would not be in the position we are today. And so you have to be in a position to respond. The hotline, when we've always had several hotlines at Iowa State, when COVID hit, again, Dr. Sellers was the one that did it, but put additional people on the hotline because their staff that handles it during normal times was going to be overwhelmed when stress hit. So you have to be able to move resources, convince people to change their role and their position because of what's needed at the time. And so I really appreciate the way that, in this case, the human sciences side responded to an ag need, even though the current stress is much broader than just agriculture. We're dealing with stress in families, we're dealing with stress within our youth, and certainly across business owners and others. Finally, I think it's important to be supportive of our staff. As a leader, you're only as good as the people supporting you. The other thing I would point out, and I've used this phrase for a while, is that stress is contagious. You catch it from those around you. Keep in mind your frontline people out there, in this case, dealing with farmers that are under stress, are also under stress. And part of it is just the mental stress of hearing the stories, hearing these devastating cases that are truly, truly sad. But the other response besides depression can be violence. So what things have you done to protect the safety of your staff? This dates back into the crisis of the 80s, but we had people come into the office armed and upset. So do your staff have a code word? Do they have an exit strategy? Have they had active shooter drills? It's sad that we have to think about that, but the danger is quite real, and it's our responsibility to help protect our staff. So, keep that in mind. Check in on them often. As I said, they're dealing with a lot of stress today, even particularly under COVID, where many of them working from home and have kids at home and still trying to work. They're in a lot of stress, just as is every other person in society, but add to that they deal with people who are also in a stressful situation. So have them use the resources that you're promoting to our clients. We've got an Iowa Concern hotline that helps people who call that number learn education about finance or their legal rights or dealing with stress. Well, are your own people using those hotlines? We train people in mental health first aid to work with their families and farmers and others that are under stress. Are our own staff taking advantage of the resources? I think it's important to keep that in mind. We need our staff to be successful. We need them to be healthy. We need them to be safe if we are going to be able to help others in our states. And so that's an important front line to keep in mind. Finally, I would just leave you with a challenge that I've put out to our people as we start looking towards recovery from the current COVID situation, or we could think about recovery from the farm financial situation. How will you be remembered in your organization? Here in Iowa, we've had to lock some doors and cancel meetings. That's not how I want to be remembered, and it's not how our staff want to be remembered. So what is it we're going to do to make a difference in people's lives? What is it a year from now that you'll be able to tell your legislatures, your university administration, and others that you did to help people in your state and make a difference? But perhaps more importantly, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, what will the people of the state tell the legislators and the Congress and university administrators that Extension did that made an impact in their life? So, Mark, I'll turn it back over to you.
John, once again, thank you. We have moved to the question. We have questions and ideas. If you're calling in, use *6 to unmute your phone if you want to share ideas or either if you have questions. Rick, do we have any in the chat box?
I believe there's one in there for the Iowa hotline.
Okay.
David, I don't know if you can answer that one there. It came at about 2:24. Is the Iowa Concern Hotline for farm audiences or general audiences?
This is David Brown. The Iowa Concern serves all audience who make calls into the hotline. So it was the Iowa Rural Concern line at one point, and they changed that to Iowa Concern. So it is open to anyone who makes a phone call.
John and or David, I'm thinking in terms of a follow-up by farmers, let's say beyond the meetings and throughout, let's say throughout the period following the meeting. Have you seen an increase once you have the training meeting, the dialogue with the farmers in a group setting? Have you seen a change in the communication pattern of the farmers?
I can start on that, and I'll let David fill in. A couple of observations, and these would tend to be comments that I get from either farmers directly or from our staff. In one, to be truthful, we've had some people that when we start talking about that, we'd have some farmers that would get up and leave the room. But others would come up and thank us for talking about a very difficult topic. The other one that has stuck with me is I've had some agribusiness professionals, fertilizer salesmen, feed salesmen, others say, after setting through that, I now know what I've been observing in my customers. I had seen it, but I didn't know what it was. And now I'm going to pay more attention on how I can help them.
Yeah, this is David Brown. I had someone, one of the producers I know well, he came up and said to me, you know, a year or so ago, you know, no one would ever even talk about stress. And now actually the farmers are actually starting to talk about it. And so now that is a top of conversation, I think is a lot of progress. And so that's the difference I've been hearing.
Okay.
Well, Mark, if I could just add a comment, I think that is why it's so important to have someone they really trust. If you have an extension specialist that they would come listen to no matter what they talked about, when they say it's okay to talk about this topic, it's okay to admit you're stressed. My dad farms and he's stressed, you know, then they find it easier to do that.
Okay. Okay. Cheryl, have you seen similar kinds of reactions?
Absolutely. And to the point about trust, you know, building that trust with having the ag educators and the health educators up there talking to a group together. And we've seen conversations out into the parking lot. And that's why I think we were excited to at least launch a pilot program for the teletherapy, because sometimes leading someone with a national hotline or just the advice to go contact their local community resources isn't enough when you've had that parking lot conversation and you really want to kind of follow up and get real supports for people. So that's something our ag educators have asked us to help support them as well. Like, how do you keep the conversations going? How do you check in? And, you know, it's a pretty blurred line where extension ends and some of that direct service starts. And we're trying to navigate that.
Cheryl, I'll be excited to see how your pilot goes. As you mentioned this, people are now, after 8 weeks, accustomed to talking to people through their phone or through a video. I think this is a real watershed moment for some of that. And so how do we as a system gear up or pass them on to the professionals that can do it.
If I may, this is Brent. I'll just follow up on that because that triggered, NIF is also getting ready to release its rural health safety education call for funding. And there is at least $1 million that have been set aside by Congress in this fiscal year cycle of 20 to support telehealth options, especially connecting rural, socially disadvantaged groups to how to understand how to use telehealth to be able to access services. So that's going to be a separate call, but it's tangential to this conversation.
During this stressful period that we are undergoing now, and I'm thinking now in terms of our educators, our agents and specialists, have you experienced our colleagues bouncing more, or let's say dialogue off each other as it relates to challenges that they're getting and receiving from the farmers? This question goes to the entire panel.
Well, Mark, I can just answer personally. This is Laura. I just wrote some notes down to talk with the extension leadership team in Georgia on Monday morning, because we actually talked about this during one of our meetings this week, that the stress level with everyone is so high that a lot of times we're getting vented to. They're not mad at us. They're just mad at the world, mad at life. And one day this week, my husband came in and he had had a tough day. He works in agriculture and he had had a lot of farmers unloading on him, basically so that he could come home and tell me so that I could do something about it. And so, you know, it's hard in that moment not to react back. And I think a lot of John's comments really resonated with me. And I'm going to start our Monday morning meeting by talking about these things. Stress is contagious. We've just got to be real careful not to take all that on and remain calm, cool, and collected and just do the best we can.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Hi, this is Natalie Roy with the AgriSafe Network. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
AgriSafe is a national nonprofit, if those of you aren't familiar with our work, and we work very closely with Extension and really find that partnership important. Just want to let y'all know, I saw a comment in here about training. We have what we call our learning lab, and in that learning lab, you're going to find a lot of trainings that many of them are actually taught by Extension professionals, especially as it relates to mental health. Those are free trainings to access, and I think they'd be excellent for onboarding for administrators and directors. I can see that was a question listed here. So you would just go to agrisafe.org and go to our learning lab, and you can sort by topic, and you see there's quite a bit in the area of mental health. Also happy to hear from Brent about potential funding for teletherapy, because we think that's super important. And you know, really, especially for agriculture, we need to be able to test and see if those systems could work.
Okay. Thank you. I see a statement and a question from Carol. There needs to be a training so that administrators and directors can better support their staff. Is something like that available?
I'm not aware that there is. I've been modeling what I've seen from other leaders, and I think there's a real sense at this time, empathy is in some cases the only thing you can offer. We can't fix the problem, but we can be understanding, and I think it's important to show that. As you read things, people are working from home and you've got kids and cats in the picture and all of that sort of thing. That's okay. We are professionals, but we are also human. And I think it's important to relay that message on an ongoing basis. I'm sure all of you have increased the level of communication through this crisis, in part to inform folks, but as we go forward through this, what level of communication is important?
Thank you, Cheryl, for the comment that you put in the comment box regarding the leadership that Jeff Dwyer provided on mental health first aid training.
Okay. There are a list of additional resources and contacts on the next two slides. Okay.
This is not an exhaustive list, and we will continue to update this material. And we're working with the program subcommittee that Carolyn Williams is chairing to make sure that we're still collect these resources as a place where you can find this background information.
Okay. The next slide, Rick. Okay. Once again, are there other questions? Are there additional questions, comments from the panelists?
This is Brent. I'll just make one additional comment because we've not touched a lot on youth and 4-H, but we know that this is also a critical area. Sometimes it's the young people that will be the first ones that'll notice their parents starting to have some real difficulties, and so they may reach out then through their 4-H clubs or others, and so we just need to make sure that those conduits to access and connect to services are clear for the young people as well. We've been having some conversations with the National Council on Behavioral Health. They're the developers of the mental health first aid training, and they're currently working on a rewrite of the youth mental health first aid, and also to ensure that we're doing better in terms of our outreach in rural, frontier, and tribal communities. So we've connected them with a couple of extension folks who have been working deeply in this field to help contribute to that revision. And then also there's going to be an announcement coming out soon for new teen mental health first aid sites. And so when you see that, we'd encourage you to share that broadly with your 4-H state leaders.
Thank you, Brett. You see a list of and you heard from some excellent resources this afternoon, and so we're asking that you keep the contact information available, and let's just share among ourselves across the system such that we can aid each other and support each other as we deal with these challenges in which we are faced, and they appear to be to just compound and compound. If it's not the weather, if it's not too wet, it's too hot. If it's we deal with the hurricanes, tornadoes, and now we're dealing with the pandemic. So there's a lot of challenges out there, but I am a firm believer that with us dialoguing like we're dialoguing now, having the conversation that we are having now among each other across the system, that is in my opinion, is a major support for us, such that we can be a strong supporter for our farmers, our youth, and just our clientele in general. Rick, do you have an announcement that you would like to make regarding another webinar that's coming up soon?
Yes, and I wonder if Cheryl could help me out here, or somebody else on the phone. North Central Regional Rural Development Center will be having a webinar on mental health next week. I believe it's Wednesday, featuring University of Minnesota. I don't have that information right with me here. I thought I did, but I don't.
That's correct, Rick. There's mental health of farm families in the North Central region with 2 presenters from Minnesota, and that's 3 o'clock Eastern time.
Thank you. Are there additional announcements? If not, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to mention Amanda Stone with Mississippi State Extension will be doing a really important webinar on dairy farmers and stress. And you can just find all that information on AgriSafe's website. And that's again, Amanda Stone with Mississippi State Extension.
Okay, that's coming up soon.
Yeah, yep, very soon. We've got the big three of the month of May here just on mental health.
Okay, great. Thank you. So once again, we want to thank our panelists for engaging and sharing and putting the time in to just share their experiences with us. We want to thank Rick Sandy for the communication and also for making the webinar another successful webinar. And Terrence, we want to thank you for all the work that you've done so that we could see each other. If there are no other questions, have a great weekend and be safe.
Thank you, everyone. Good weekend.
Okay.